Hey guys, it's Dr. Linda Goggin. You can call me Sunny. And here I am. Today I'm going to talk about something that I'm just learning about that I'm pretty excited about, which is the research around how hydrogen can help a body heal. And this research comes from an amazing professor and researcher who is in Japan, Professor Shigeo Ota. And he was the first person to characterize how hydrogen can help in the body. Interestingly, before his research came along, we really felt as though hydrogen was inert in cells and it was not something that we could use to heal. And so this is very important information because it might help your health. It might help the health of somebody that you love. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. So Dr. Ota is a professor emeritus at Nippon Medical University in Tokyo, Japan. And he got his PhD from the University of Tokyo in 1979. He's served as the honorary president of the Japanese Society of Mitochondrial Research and Medicine and the Japanese Biomedical Society for Molecular Biology and the International Society of Hydrogen Medicine and Biology. So his publication citations, guys, over 17,000 publications. And his H index, which is like how often you're cited, is 70 in hydrogen medicine, and that's amazing. That means that people all over the world are looking towards him because he, I guess, would be considered maybe the godfather of hydrogen medicine as a way to help healing. And if you look him up on Google Scholar, his first article back from 2005 has been cited over 2,700 times. So what that is to say is that he is a really important player in helping people understand how hydrogen might help. And who am I? I'm just a family doctor turned into a functional medicine doctor because I got sick. And I'm looking for ways that we can get the most benefit with the least harm and get people feeling better. And so hydrogen may be something you want to take a look at. And let me just go through the research a little bit so you understand a bit more about why this could be helpful for you. First off, if you haven't heard of something called reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress, lots of people take antioxidants as supplements because they're trying to correct this increase in inflammation that comes from something the body naturally does but can go awry, particularly with infections, toxins, exposures, stress, and years aging. We start to build up more of these reactive oxygen species. And what can happen then is this can lead to illness. And when we look at how free radical stress manifests in the body, we see it in every organ system. So in the heart, in the gut, in kidneys, skin. I see people with complex medical illness, and sometimes it's all over the body. And if your doctor has ever said, we need to get your inflammation down, well, the doctor that you're talking with is referring to this free radical oxidative stress. Now, some free radicals in your body are actually kind of important. They help us with healing and cleaning up things that are not right. And some are very damaging. So when Dr. Oda decided that he was going to look at hydrogen, let me tell you a little bit about how he discovered this could be a novel antioxidant. And when I say novel, I mean it is truly unique because many antioxidants, they really cannot reach the tissue that they need to help. And what's cool about hydrogen is it's so super tiny that it can actually reach all of your tissues. So back in January 2005, here's a little bit of background to help you understand. So you see on the left side of this reaction, oxygen. Oxygen can interact with electrons and make different compounds that have increasing ability to create damage. And so the hydroxyl radical, which is on the right, is something that we want to limit and we want to be able to quench because it can have so many damaging properties. In between oxygen and the hydroxyl radical are superoxide and hydrogen peroxide, and these are important substances. So we really don't want to quench them because they help us clean up when stuff's not working in our body. Okay, so we want to selectively reduce hydroxyl radicals because it has such a powerful ability, and peroxynitrate, which is another one, has a powerful ability to damage the body. But we have to have enough oxidative stress so that we can repair. So we just don't want to go all the way to the right. And that's what it seems hydrogen gas is able to do. And here's one of the first slides. This is from that paper in 2005, looking at the effect of hydrogen gas on these different components, such as superoxide, nitric oxide, hydrogen peroxide, and those we don't want to reduce. And on the right, we have hydroxyl radical. And we see when we add hydrogen gas, there is a reduction in the hydroxyl radical. So going on, we're looking at one more slide, and this is showing cell living or dead. Okay, red is dead and green is alive. And they created an oxidative stress situation in glass, like in a petri dish, and then they added hydrogen to one set of the controls. And what we see is with time, at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes, in the samples that added hydrogen gas, you see more living cells. All right, so this is interesting, and this is an important finding, and this is the paper that kind of kicked it all off and led to Dr. Oda's interest in this field. And after that, you go, well, how could this possibly help people, right? Could this help people? And now when you look at all of the PubMed, you go to PubMed and you search hydrogen as a health benefit. Over the past 17 years, more than 3,000 articles have been published. You see it's going up rapidly. And my prediction is that whenever we find something that does not harm and helps a bunch, people are going to be very interested in this. So you're going to continue to see these publications going up. And, why is this different than other antioxidants? I alluded to this before when I said that it can get into tissues and cells. Well, interestingly, every cell, if you go back to your basic biology, every cell in your body is surrounded by a fatty bilayer membrane, right? So it's got this lipid membrane made of fats. And in order for things to go through that, it either has to go through a channel where it's protected or has to be able to dissolve in fats. Hydrogen is so tiny, if you recall from the periodic table of elements, it's the tiniest one, and hydrogen gas is so small that it can pass right through the cell's membrane. And it can also dissolve in water, right? So it is a unique type of compound that is happy in water, happy in fat. And that means it's so tiny that it can penetrate membranes and is able to get to those places where we need to reduce oxidative stress. And that potentially makes it maybe a healing agent. Let's look at the research so you can understand a little bit more about how we might use this and how this might help us maybe in the future, maybe tomorrow, maybe today. The ways that you can ingest hydrogen gas is by inhaling it, drinking it. Intestinal bacteria actually produce some hydrogen gas. We can take a supplement that will generate hydrogen gas in the stomach. People have done studies looking at it in drops. It can be transferred through the skin by hydrogen bath or hydrogen cosmetics. So these are the different ways that you could get some into your body. And what we see when we are looking at the research that I'm going to go through for you is it reduces inflammation. It helps stimulate energy production in the body. It can help prevent cell death and help to make sure that the healthy cells stay alive and the cells that are not working well are going through autophagy. So regulating autophagy, which is actually when we clean up the dead wood and we get rid of cells that are not working. And when we look at the papers, we see that there have been, looking at different disease models in animals, over 200 different kinds of disease models have been looked at. And already we've had more than 200 clinical studies published around the potential benefits of hydrogen. And what areas are people looking at? Of course, the big problems in our society, such as cardiovascular issues, dementia, acute diseases, things like diabetes, things like obesity, and uh, metabolism issues. And because everyone wants to stay young, people are looking at it for prevention, for anti-aging, for sports performance, and for beauty. Even looking at how could it benefit our pets? How could it benefit the growth of plants? And if you can look in Nature, Springer Nature 2024, there is a review article, The Emergence, Development, and Future Mission of Hydrogen Medicine and Biology by Dr. Oda himself, called Molecular Hydrogen and Health and Disease. And that would be a paper that will give you a good overview. These are a few things I've already mentioned, but hydrogen is antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-allergy, and stimulates cellular energy. So we're going to go through these and let's compare it to our conventional toolbox of medications. When we give a medication, usually it's very specific, one organ, one action, and in one direction. And many times we will have negative outcomes like adverse effects or side effects. But so far from hydrogen gas, there has not been any adverse effect so far. So, that still remains to be seen, but it's interesting as it's been going on for, 17 years. We're seeing a lot of clinical studies coming out. This is just a sense of, the across the breadth of medicine. We're seeing people looking at this in all different facets. And there have now been papers covering all of, I'm not going to read all these, different disease processes, but people have looked at many disease processes to try and understand how it can affect the body. And when we have something new in medicine, it's important we understand how it applies to each different part of medicine, right? So you can't say, "Oh, this works great for heart health, and therefore it's going to work great for everything else." It's just that doesn't follow, and we want to make sure we're using good studies to understand the effects. And so it's nice to start to see these meta-analysis looking like in the area of, in the dental area, for instance, in the cardiovascular area, in lipids, in fatigue and aerobic capacity and performance, cancer management. And these meta-analysis are things that you can look up on PubMed and find them so you can start to investigate for yourself whether or not this is something that you want to know more about, or maybe even use yourself. In the future, and that's the not too distant future, everybody is going to be using this. I'm just telling you that that's going to happen. And the people who are slow adopters, I think that's fine as long as someone who is a slow adopter really goes to look to the research and start to understand how it can affect the body. So let's go and start to talk a little bit about these studies that have supported the use of hydrogen gas in our health. So first, it has to begin with animals, right? We want to make sure it's safe. And we see that hydrogen in the mouse, in the tiny little fly, Drosophila and nematodes, extended the average lifespan. Now, it didn't extend the maximum lifespan, and that suggests that it probably is improving general health, but not like making telomeres bigger or anything like that. And when we look at how do we translate, okay, the average lifespan is extended for animals. How does this translate into medicine for people? Well, you need to start to look at selectively larger animals and try and then we'll apply it to people, right? And so this is where they started. They began with mice, and they actually created an ischemic area in the brain. That is, they kind of gave the little mices a stroke. Okay, and then they gave the mice hydrogen gas. Some of them, the ones who were in the active treatment group, and then some they didn't give the hydrogen gas. And what they saw, if you look at this, this is the little pictures of the brains. On the left side, the white areas are the dead areas in the brain. And on the right side, you're seeing the hydrogen gas where the dead area is reduced using the hydrogen gas. Well, this was so interesting. They were like, wow, this is like mind blowing. Not only that, because this was so profound, it didn't take long before they were able to move into using this with people. And so 25 people who had had a stroke were inhaled the hydrogen gas, 25 didn't. And you look at the difference, and we have a statistically significant finding of improvement in rehabilitation and an improvement in what we're seeing on the MRI in the people who inhaled hydrogen gas. Interesting, right? And so now when we go on a little further, because we look at animals first and we want to translate it into people. This is another study showing after little mices have had a cardiac arrest and had been resuscitated, they gave them hydrogen gas. Some of them they didn't. And what we see is, in terms of who survived and who didn't, big difference, big difference. The hydrogen group, 23% died. The control group, 69% died. Huge difference there. And then in terms of memory, they tested the memory with, however you test mice, it has to do with like little, puzzles and things like that. In the hydrogen group, we see a maintenance of some memory ability and maintenance of motor ability, whereas these were lost in the control group that was not using the hydrogen gas. And so then this was such a dramatic effect on the mice. What was decided was that it was very safe and it was reasonable to try in people. And so this was published in 2023 in Japan. And this is showing after a cardiac arrest in people, they had some of them inhale hydrogen and some of them not. And what you see is they're looking at sequela. When you look at the green bar, that is people who had problems after cardiac arrest, sequela, right? So weakness, memory problems, all of these kind of issues. Almost half of them had no sequela after their cardiac arrest, where we see only 21% after cardiac arrest in the control group who did not get the hydrogen had no sequela. And okay, let's look at the death, little Grim Reaper there on the right. 39% of the people who did not get hydrogen gas died after the cardiac arrest. Only 15% of the people who got hydrogen gas died. So this is huge, right? And what happened was 40 minutes after the heartbeat resumed, they put the hydrogen gas on there, okay? But the question is, why does the effect persist? And that's what we were looking at, or well, not me. I mean, I'm just telling you about the study. But part of this has to do with the ability of hydrogen gas to pass the blood-brain barrier, and understanding that we've typically thought of the blood-brain barrier as being kind of keeping most stuff out, but it's so tiny, able to be soluble in fat, making it able to pass the blood-brain barrier. And that's why we're looking at it in Alzheimer's disease, in neurodegenerative issues, and other things that might cause cell death and might cause energy decline in people. Because most of the things that we swallow or even put in the vein cannot always cross the blood-brain barrier. And so looking at, mice that have been stressed, half given hydrogen water, half not, what we see is an improvement in memory ability in those who were given the hydrogen water. And so now the question is, does this translate to improvement in memory? And could this translate to improvement in people's memory if we were able to give people hydrogen gas? When we look at a mouse model of Alzheimer's, we see that the changes we would usually see in a mousy brain with Alzheimer's are suppressed using hydrogen gas compared to controls. And that's really, really exciting because right now we do not have a lot of great treatments for Alzheimer's, and so many of us are touched by this terrible issue. So when we want to try and look at good studies, randomized studies, double blind placebo controlled trials. Really, these are the gold standard. And when we are evaluating someone with Alzheimer's disease, we evaluate them using cognitive scales, right? That's one of the ways they're evaluated. And when we think of the approved treatments, like donazepam is one of those medications that we give people with memory problems related to Alzheimer's. And this will slightly slow the cognitive decline and may result in, a couple of points better on a cognitive scoring. And what this study showed in people who had mild cognitive impairment, so that's not full-blown Alzheimer's, right? Mild cognitive impairment is sort of a Alzheimer's light or maybe pre-Alzheimer's. Not everybody with mild cognitive impairment goes on to have Alzheimer's, but people with memory problems and who have the special gene called ApoE4 that increases the risk of Alzheimer's. And they had the people who had the ApoE4 genotype, half of them drinking hydrogen water and half of them not. And what's nice about water is that you can pretty easily do a placebo control because people don't know whether or not they're getting the hydrogen water or not. And in this randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, what we found was an improvement in the cognitive scoring. And the blue dots are the scores. And what we're seeing, that's the score change. And when we want this to what we're looking at is improvement. So that's really amazing because we don't have anything except for, I think, the RECODE protocol has shown some very good improvements in people's cognitive scoring too. So, I mean, this is, thinking about, should you check for ApoE4? Well, if you have ApoE4, that gene, you might be wanting to drink some hydrogen water to try and ward off whatever's happening. This is just a case report, but I think what we want to look at is that um, in a person with Alzheimer's disease, you have someone taking care of that person, and one of those things, bowel habits and getting to the bathroom is so important. And this is just one person, but the report is showing a significant improvement in fecal incontinence, which is for a caregiver very helpful. And when we look at the MRI, we're seeing more active motor bundles, which is, this is just one person, but don't we wonder if what would happen if we looked at a lot of people, improvement in the motor activity in the brain. And these are papers out of China and Korea showing improvement with hydrogen gas inhalation on people who have Alzheimer's and markers for Alzheimer's. So this is pretty interesting. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the effect of hydrogen water on metabolic syndrome because it also affects many of us. When we're trying to study something in the lab, we will create a model that's in animals, right? And so there's a model in animals, the BDDB mutant mice. They can't regulate their appetite. They eat a lot. And the question is, how could hydrogen affect the mice, right? So basically, what they found is given the special mice sort of set up for metabolic problems, set up for diabetes. So it's a mouse you know is going to get diabetes, and a mouse, and then a mouse that's going to get diabetes, but you give him the hydrogen water. What happens? We see a reduction in body fat, a reduction in their overall glucose, in their insulin, and in their triglycerides. So basically, that means that their metabolism has been normalized by adding hydrogen water. And this suggests that adding the hydrogen, it activates energy metabolism. And that's like, whoa, well, how could that be happening, right? I mean, we know we're quenching some inflammation, right? So as we talked about, well, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about how it happens. We are quenching that inflammation, and but this is a very interesting finding, and it's unexpected, not expected. We know that when you give little mice, high fat diet, they are going to have a shorter lifespan. That is what happens. And a normal diet is better, but a high fat diet with hydrogen water, the mice fare better. So that's very interesting. Also, this is out of the NPJ Aging in March of 2016. And when you look at the analysis, you see an improvement, and this is a randomized, double blind, placebo controlled, right? That's what we like to see. Clinical study done in Japan, looking at people, their body mass index, total fat area, waist circumference, and hip circumference, seeing a statistically significant improvement in these markers. So I think that when you think about how in Japan, 80% of the fitness clubs in Japan have not hydrogen water, hydrogen that you breathe while you work out. That's because it improves endurance, improves personal best records. It can help prevent injury. It will reduce your fatigue, and people are going to get more benefit from their exercise. Um, then we couldn't leave out cancer, because it's cancer is such a fear for many of us, and not just cancer itself, but also the therapy, because cancer therapies are very hard on people. There are side effects, and people feel crummy during the whole time that they're treated. Looking at, and this is a systematic review of molecular hydrogen therapy and cancer management, in 2023. What has been shown is a slowing of disease progression, an improvement in the immune functions, and a reduction in the side effects from treatment, as well as an alleviation, a synergistic effect with hydrogen and treatments. So it doesn't get in the way of treatments. It helps your body be able to respond. And when we're kind of wondering, like, well, if you put hydrogen in a water, it will dissolve quickly. So you've got to drink it fast. Okay. So the question is, if we know hydrogen is gone from the body after, a half a day to a day, why is it having this prolonged effect? Well, the fact is, what we see is when we add hydrogen, we start to produce more signal molecules that will have downstream effects. So when we think about the hormone ghrelin, which helps you in terms of managing your appetite, or FGF21 also enhances energy metabolism. These are the signals that when you give hydrogen, they increase, and that means that the hydrogen benefit goes on, and it's not just while it's in the body. And wondering why the mechanism, how it's working, how is it exactly working. This is a paper from 2023 showing basically a reason that this has a prolonged effect. So this is a big breakthrough showing that in porphyrin molecules, adding hydrogen gas can help repair porphyrin molecules that have been oxidized. And when I see patients with complex medical illness, specifically with mold, I've checked people's porphyrins, and sometimes I find that they have an acquired porphyria, like their porphyrins in their body and the metabolism of porphyrins and the production of porphyrins is mixed up. It's not right. And to repair porphyrins in the body affects many, many different molecules, many enzyme systems, many body systems. And so this is probably a big part of how hydrogen has its effect, because we see porphyrins in hemoglobin, So hemes are a beautiful molecule. You see it there in the center with iron in the middle, that will carry oxygen in the blood. It's critical importance in the body, right? And when we have oxidative stress, it can make it so they do not function as well and they don't break down normally and can create toxic metabolites. So we see that oxidative stress in muscle tissue or myoglobin also involves porphyrins that ain't working right, and oxidative stress in other membranes like mitochondria is a really membrane rich uh, organelle. Uh, and so when these porphyrins get oxidized, they do not work as well. And what we see is that hydrogen can repair and activate the oxidized porphyrin, and this will take bad things and make it better without side effects. And that's very interesting, because we see porphyrins in all different kinds of living organisms. It's probably part of the reason why when we apply hydrogen water to plants, plants are going to do better. And even when we breathe out hydrogen from the lungs, the effects of hydrogen are going to maintain an effect through the body for a longer period of time. Lastly, I don't know if anybody got COVID, but I know I got COVID and I felt super sick. The reason we felt so sick when we got COVID is because we had an increase of something called cytokines. And inflammatory cytokines come from the body trying to protect itself, and sometimes they can get out of control. And understanding that hydrogen could potentially help to quench this cytokine storm, it's a very interesting prospect. So what we see, and this is such a busy slide, I don't want you to worry too much about understanding every step of it, but the important thing is this shows us an inflammatory cascade that ends in poor energy metabolism and increase of inflammatory cytokines. But when you give hydrogen, when you add hydrogen gas to the system, we see an activation of PGC1 alpha, which helps regulate fatty acid metabolism. And we are going to see a reduction in this 4-HNE, which will slow down this peroxidation and this inflammatory process and slow down the production of inflammatory cytokines, which is so important. And here, this is just another, oh gosh, super busy slide, showing that when you add hydrogen gas, you are going to slow down the production of inflammatory cytokines. And these are really new ideas. And now everybody's heard that phrase, cytokine storm, in association with COVID. But the fact is, other things cause cytokine storms. And it's really when the body's innate immune system kind of goes a little bit bonkers, and it makes people not feel good. And instead of helping them heal, it helps them be inflamed. And everybody wants to lower inflammation, because what we're understanding now is markers for mortality are: am I getting enough nutrients? Am I getting enough protein? Am I adequately nourished? And how inflamed am I? So markers for inflammation and markers for adequate nourishment are really big when we're talking about how can we avoid mortality, stay well, and feel good. So I think, when you look at all of the things that hydrogen can do in the body, and there's going to be more discovered all the time, it's something interesting to consider as a strategy to help your body feel better. And I'm sure that you'll start to hear more and more about this. So I hope you found that interesting, and write a comment, ask me questions, or you can send me an email, clinic@feelgoodfunctionalmed.com, and I can answer your questions. So thanks for joining me. I hope you guys have a blessed, blessed day.